Welcome back to Detail Garage. Today we're going to be doing some in-depth detailing on restoring a third brake light. Now on our YouTube channel we've done a lot of headlight restoration videos where we restore headlights back to original condition. Now we're going to be restoring a third brake light. Now this third brake light is faded and has a lot of scratches right on the front of the brake light. So we're going to restore it back to original condition and try to get some shine back. Now the reason I wanted to restore this third brake light is because when I look at the tail lights on this vehicle, the tail lights are actually super clear, but this brake light is very faded. Now that's because the red color of plastic or any red paint job is actually going to fade faster than any other paint job or any other color, because red absorbs UV solar lights. So the UV solar lights has affected the plastic and actually discolored the surface itself. Now the reason I wanted to make a video on doing this third brake light restoration is that this brake light's flush mounted to the trunk itself. So that makes it a super difficult task. Now, most people would say, well, you could just tape off the edge of the brake light and then go ahead and sand it and buff it. That makes it really hard to do because when I buff it, I'm gonna be putting pressure on the edge of the paint. Now, when paint has an edge, that's where the paint is actually the thinnest. And if you go too hard on an edge with a buffer, you can actually burn through the paint itself. Now, most people would try to use a smaller pad to do this. I know there's a couple guys out there that make custom 1-inch and even half-inch size pads to do jobs like this. But in my opinion, it's still gonna put a lot of pressure on the edge of this paint job and might damage the paint permanently. So to restore the third brake light, what we actually decided to do was remove it from the trunk itself. So on the back side of the trunk, there's actually just two 8mm bolts. And I'm gonna go ahead and remove the brake light from the vehicle, and then I'm gonna go ahead and polish it on the table and reinstall it back. That way I don't have any risk of burning the paint or the edge, and I'm gonna get better results when I'm done. Plus I'm gonna save a lot of time because I want it to tape up and I want it to be as careful because I can sand and make it look just right before I put it back in the car. Now I'm gonna use an 8mm ratchet, and I'm gonna remove the brake light, and then we're gonna move over to the table and show you guys exactly how to restore a third brake light away from the car or on a table. So let's get inside, pull this brake light out, and then we'll show you how it's done. So I've gone ahead and removed the third brake light from the trunk assembly. Now this is gonna make it a lot easier to polish and to sand down the surface to refinish the tail light itself. Now I noticed when I pulled this off, there's actually two little clips. So I'm actually gonna remove the whole front lens assembly from the electronics itself. Now that way I could set the electronics aside, not get them wet, and I can just focus on restoring the actual lens. Now to restore the lens, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a traditional sand and polish restoration where I sand off any dead material and then I polish it back to original condition. So I have some water here and I have some 2500 grit and 3500 grit sandpaper. I'm gonna first sand with the 2500 and water, and then I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the 3500. So I'm gonna take some water, spray it on the surface, and I'm gonna spray my pad. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gently gonna sand the light itself. Now you guys see all that liquidy, like almost milky water that's coming off of the light itself? That is actually the dead plastic that absorbed all the UV solar rays. Now, what I'm gonna try to do is sand off that dead plastic, and then we're gonna try to buff this using a buffer. So I'm gonna sand this for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna trade my sandpapers. So now I've finished sanding down with the 2500 grit sandpaper. As you can see on the light's already starting to look a lot better. Now, one area I'm trying to concentrate on is there's oxidation actually stuck in the logos and the part numbers on this light. And the reason I wanted to make this video is because a lot of guys out there might have cars where the parts aren't made anymore, or they do what's called concourse show car events. Now at concourse show car events, you actually get deducted points for every part that's not original on the car. So if you're into Porsches or Mustangs or any kind of classic cars like Volkswagens, you'll often get deducted points if the judges see that the part isn't original. Now this part on this Mustang isn't even made anymore. And if you were to buy a knockoff part or a replica part, it's not gonna have the original Ford logo or the part number. So say the owner is at a car show, judge looks at the part on the trunk, and then sees that it's not an original part, you'll actually get docked points. Now, if you have an original part and you want to get it to look good, this is the best way to do it, to restore the original part instead of buying another one. Now I'm going to focus a little bit more on the numbers, the model numbers, and the Ford logo, because there's like wax buildup and polish buildup from a lot of the years, and I'm going to have to use a sandpaper to sand it out before I move on to the next step. So we'll sand a little bit more and then we'll move on. So I finished sanding down the light with the 2500 grit sandpaper. Now it's feeling very smooth and I was able to remove any type of residue. So now I'm actually gonna pull my sandpaper off of my adhesion block, and I'm gonna go ahead and put on my 3500 grit sandpaper. Now this is to refine the finish before I go ahead and buff it off. Now the reason I'm using a sanding block instead of traditional sandpaper like you might find at the hardware store is because this block is actually flexible. And this light has small contours and also has all these serial numbers and emblems on the light that I don't want to sand off or sand away. Now this is probably the easiest step now that the whole light is completely sanded. All I need to do is just sand this for a moment, refine the finish, and then I'm going to buff it with a buffer. So I'm going to take this, sand it for a moment, and then we're going to come back and we're going to restore the light back to the shine original condition. So I finished sanding the light and now I've grabbed a rotary buffer. Now I'm going to restore the light by buffing out all of the scratches from the 25 and the 3500 grit sandpaper. And what I'm going to do is I'm first going to use an orange pad with V32, and then I'm going to use a white pad with V36 to refine down the finish. Now this is kind of really difficult, that's why I wanted to show it on camera, because I'm gonna have to hold the light and buff it, or I'm gonna have to put the buffer on the table and move the light along the buffer. It's not one of those things where you can just hold the buffer up and buff it. And if I did it on the car, I'd be burning the edge on the paint. So let's see how we can do this today. Let's put on our pad. Always make sure before you start that your pad is centered. There we go. Now, to avoid any type of splatter, I'm going to take my polishes and I'm going to rub them into the pad just a little bit. There we go. Put on 2 little dots, and I'm actually just going to rub the polish into the pad just a little bit. I'm also going to give it a spray of water, and this is just so I don't get a lot of fling as I polish. So I'm going to take my machine, I'm going to turn it on to speed setting 1, and I'm going to lock the trigger. And then I'm going to try and polish the light as we go. Now, just after polishing the light a little bit, I'm actually getting the shine back, but I want to get all the way to the edge. So I'm going to go grab some blue painter's tape. I'm going to tape up this small little seal on the edge so I don't mess it up with a buffer. And then I'm going to buff a little bit more. See you in a second. So I've taped up the light now, and I'm gonna go ahead and just put a little bit more polish on my pad. Now I can polish it a little bit more aggressively without harming that sensitive rubber seal on the edge. Okay, so we're back. This is actually getting to be a very challenging job. When we were buffing with the rotary buffer, we got a little heat spot on the light and actually burned the plastic. Now I was able to re-sand it. I sanded that spot down and then rebuffed, and we're good to go. The thing about detailing is you might encounter weird challenges like this, and sometimes you can't buy a new part just like this one where it doesn't exist anymore, so I'm gonna have to go restoring it. Now I've already got the light looking a lot better. It still has some light micro marring, so I'm gonna switch to a DA. I got the TORQ machine out here, a white pad, and I'm gonna use V36. Let me shake up my V36. If you don't know, V36 is a cutting polish, and this is designed to enhance the shine a little bit more. And I'm gonna use a soft polishing white Tex Logic pad to hopefully finish out the job. Now honestly, this is one of the hardest restorations I've ever had to do, so make sure if you're doing a job like this that you set out the time to do it and you don't rush it, because if you rush it, you can end up with a messed up part that you'll never be able to find again. I'm gonna go ahead and turn my machine on. I'm gonna buff this at about speed setting 3 or 4. Okay, so as you can see, I was able to buff off any of the last sanding marks using the white pad. I just realized right now there's one spot I missed close to the edge, and honestly it's because the tape was kind of blocking it. I'm gonna go ahead and add just a little bit more V36, work the corner, and then we're gonna try and seal this light up for you guys. Okay, so I finished buffing off the V36 with the white pad, and my light's looking a lot better. It actually has that shine back. Now, as you can see, this is like a challenging task, and if you guys out there aren't a professional detailer, you're maybe an amateur or just a weekend warrior, this is the type of stuff that professionals deal with every day. Tasks that you hoping you're gonna come out good, you don't know if you're gonna come out good, because detailing, it's all about getting out there and just trying it to see if it's gonna work. Because as much of a science as this is in 2015, there's still spots where you don't know what's gonna happen. So let's take off my tape. And the tape kind of helped me protect the seal on the edge. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab some glass cleaner, and I'm gonna clean the outside and the inside of the light, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put some JetSeal on it. So let me grab my products, and then we'll get back to it. Okay, so we're back with some window cleaner. I'm gonna go ahead and spray the window cleaner on the outside of the light. This is gonna hopefully knock off any extra polish that got stuck on the edge, and I'm gonna try to maybe clean up the seal a little bit on this one. Now this is gonna work on all plastic lights so if you have a plastic headlight, or if you have a plastic tail light or a third brake light like this one, this method is gonna work just perfectly fine. There we go. Now that I got the light cleaned up, I'm gonna flip my towel over to a clean side. I'm going to grab some JetSeal, and I'm gonna put some JetSeal on it. Now the reason I'm putting JetSeal on the light is so it protects it from any type of UV solar rays. That's what actually caused this light to become discolored, was all the UV solar rays. So I'm gonna take just a little bit of JetSeal, I'm gonna put it on the light, and I'm gonna put this on and spread it over. Now this is gonna protect the light, make sure that it doesn't become discolored anymore before I install it. Now this needs to dry for 20 minutes. Once it's dry, we're gonna come back, install it back onto the electronics, and then plug it back into the trunk. Show you guys the result. See you in 20. Okay, so we're back after 20 minutes and the JetSeal's dried. Now I'm gonna take a blue microfiber towel. This is for like glass and optical grade plastic. And I'm just going to buff off any of the excess from the light. There we go, boom, okay. Now I cleaned the light on the inside and the outside, and the light's having to have a lot more gloss. The light actually didn't have this gloss before. It looked very flat, and you could see when it stood out on the car that it just didn't look as good. So now our light and our lens is looking good. So now I'm gonna take my light assembly right here. And I'm gonna carefully connect the light assembly back up to the housing. So I'm gonna go ahead and match up the guides and then click it in. There we go, boom. Cool. So now I'm gonna go ahead and take this, install it in the trunk, and then we'll show you guys the results. See you guys in a moment. So now we finished the third brake light restoration on this SN95 Mustang. And we were able to take this brake light from being faded and discolored back to having an original gloss appearance. Now this will work for any type of tail light, third brake light, or turn signal that you have on the car that might become discolored. Now you've seen the whole process that I did on the table by removing the light and polishing it on a flat surface. Now imagine if I was to do this on the car. I would have burned the paint, shoved polish into the crack, and the job would have looked horrible. So to get better results, oftentimes detailing might require taking the car apart, doing it on a table, and then putting it back together. Now this will also work on fog lights too that are recessed in the body. This Mustang has fog lights that are pushed into the bumper, and there's no way you could ever fit a buffer or a buffing pad into that spot. So the only way to do it would be to remove the fog light from the car, sand it, and polish it on a table. Now this is a great process to do if your vehicle has parts that aren't being made anymore. Like this third brake light isn't made. You can't buy it new and you can't buy it from a dealer. So the only way to keep the brake light is to restore it. So if you have a collector car like a Porsche, a Mustang, a BMW, or any type of classic car that has plastic parts that are fading over time, you can go ahead and use this process to restore it and keep your car 100% original. Hopefully you guys like this video. If you do, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to click that subscribe button and check out the other 700 videos we have all on our YouTube channel. Videos from doing small details just like this one, or big videos where we foam cannon and detail full cars from start to finish. Now hopefully we'll see you next time right here in the Detail Garage. Always remember to have fun, stay clean, and keep on detailing.